All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Jeff here from Films at Home. And today's video, again, unfortunately, you don't get to see my pretty face. I'm going to be behind the camera because we are doing an unboxing and review of this brand new Resident Evil 6 movie complete 4K limited edition collection. This just came in from Sony. It's available on November 17th. And so that is just a few days from now. I will leave a link down in the description to purchase. But we're going to jump through a quick unboxing and then talk about quickly each of the 4K releases and what you get with this set. So jumping right into it, I have just removed the shrink wrap, but you'll notice that this is one of those releases that has the PS5 4K Movie Essentials tag on it. And that's interesting because Sony's been pushing out re-releases of many 4K releases with this PS5 tag. Feels like they're going really all in on marketing their 4K discs and 4K movies in conjunction with the PS5, which is a good thing because, as I've previously stated, I think the PS5 could give 4K a big boost just because it's the Xbox will as well, but I think the PlayStation 5 will sell more, and I think it could be a big boost, especially with this type of marketing. Now, it also makes a lot of sense because obviously Resident Evil based off of a video game franchise, and that's how we get this movie franchise. So it's a very smart tie-in from a marketing standpoint. So this is just a removable. This has just those glue stickies, and on the back it just shows you what the 6 different movies in the collection are. You know, you get a digital code with this, which I've already removed. But here's your box set. So this is what you get. It's got the Umbrella Corporation on the back. Otherwise, it's pretty just standard. It's not a whole lot of artwork. You do get the Resident Evil collection on the top, and then the kind of Umbrella Corporation logo there. But the set itself, the box is pretty sturdy, but the way it works is that you're going to take the top off, and then that's where your discs are going to be. So here are your 6 discs, and each disc comes in a sleeve basically like this. So it's a this is just cardboard, nothing crazy, and then your 4K disc and your Blu-ray disc. So each movie has its own sleeve with the artwork for that movie. So I'll take all these out and show you. Here's Resident Evil Extinction, and they all have a little bit of artwork on the inside as well. Next up, here's Resident Evil Afterlife, Resident Evil Retribution, and the final Resident Evil, the final chapter. Now it also comes with this tiny little booklet, which basically just tells you what special features are available and what each of the movies is about. So nothing really crazy there. You'll notice that many of the 4K discs don't have too much in terms of special features. Most of those special features are going to be on the Blu-ray. So that's basically your set. I mean, it's not, it's not steel books or anything. It's, just standard kind of cardboard. We've seen these before in other sets. They do a fine job of holding the discs. So like, I don't really want to complain there. But I do think that a lot of people, especially people who are interested in this set, would have preferred some sort of a steelbook type packaging, as we saw with like Rambo, and I'm trying to think, the Game of Thrones 4K steelbook set was pretty nice. Back to the Future 4K steelbooks. So, I think that's something that people were looking for, but unfortunately you don't get that with this set. So that is pretty much it, for the unboxing. Just pop this off. There's your 6 discs. This pops back on, and that's how it works. You do have to be careful because this will obviously slide off, and then all your discs will fall out if you pick it up the wrong way, which is kind of funny because if I put it like this, you wouldn't be able to tell that this is the wrong way, and then you'd pick it up and all your discs would come out. So just make sure you have it the right way. So that's kind of the box. It's nothing crazy. It's pretty simple, but well packaged, sturdy. It'll look fine on a shelf, but nothing that really stands out in comparison to some of the other box set collections that I've seen lately. I'd put this in terms of packaging on par with like the Hitchcock set, Nothing crazy with packaging, but not as good as those Rambo steelbooks, those Back to the Future steelbooks, things like that. So now if we break down each movie quickly for 4K quality and transfers and audio, the first one, of course, Resident Evil, the original. This was shot in 35mm, and it is a pretty good 4K transfer. They obviously went back to the source. You can see the uptick in detail. HDR was not overwhelming, which is good. It retained a lot of the movie's original color palette and didn't mess with that too much. And it also has an Atmos track, as does every release in this box. Actually, they all have Atmos tracks with a 7.1 True HD source on the 4K disc. And the Atmos track on this is very nice. And I should say, if you're looking for a great audio experience, the Atmos track across the board in this entire collection on all 6 movies, really, really nice work. Sony knows how to do Atmos. Sony knows how to do audio, and they do a great job. So Resident Evil, the first one, being a 35mm source, it has a fairly grainy picture, but I did enjoy it. I think it's a much improved upgrade over the Blu-ray, so you'll be happy with the first one. Now the second movie, Resident Evil Apocalypse, again shot on 35mm. I thought this was a better scan than the first Resident Evil, just in terms of detail and grain structure. It was definitely, maybe it's just because it's a couple years newer, although, you know, it's 2002 versus I think 2004, so that's probably that probably doesn't explain it. But I think it had much better colors as well. Again, the HDR doesn't overwhelm you, so it doesn't completely change the look and feel of the movie. But black levels on this I thought were a little bit better. The gray uniformity was better, and there weren't as many, you know, artifacts in the grain. So I really liked this one. I thought this was one of the better presentations on 4K in the collection. Now jumping to Resident Evil Extinction, this is a very interesting one because it's 2007, and this is actually my favorite of the series. So Resident Evil Extinction I like the most, but it was shot on 35mm, but according to IMDb and other sources online, it was actually finished digitally off the 35mm with a 2K digital intermediate. And so this is a 2K to 4K upscale, even though it was shot on 35mm. So that's very interesting because it was shot on 35mm, you get that grain structure, but it was finished digitally, so it's a much smoother image than some of the other two that were shot on 35mm and transferred right to 4K. I had a hard time reviewing this because I couldn't decide, do I like that? It's a really odd thing to see movies shot on 35mm that were then finished digitally, but this movie came out right in that kind of transition period between digital and film. And so that probably explains why there's a digital intermediate. But I didn't love the picture on this, but the color was much better. Detail was lesser than the other two. I think you lose a lot by going to a 2K digital instead of keeping that 35mm source. And from what I can tell, this was not restored from the 35mm. This was brought to 4K from the 2K upscale. So a little bit of a lesser in quality and grain structure and detail, but the color and the HDR that's on this release I thought was probably the best of these first 3. So there's that trade-off. And the Atmos track on this one in particular, I thought was the highlight of the entire series. It has a great Atmos track that I was really, really happy with. So I'd mark this as a serious audio highlight, even though it's not my favorite from a visual standpoint. So now we're getting into some of the newer movies which were shot digitally. This is Resident Evil Afterlife. This did have a 3D release originally, but you do not get the 3D disc here. So you just get your Blu-ray and your 4K. And this is a 2K digital intermediate. So it's a 2K to 4K upscale, not a true 4K title. But the digital picture, I do think, as I said with Resident Evil Extinction, I think that is a little bit more impressive when it comes to HDR when it's shot digitally. And that may just be because of the digital source versus the 35mm and the work that had to be done to kind of revamp and do new color grading. But the digital source may be easier to work with. I don't know a whole lot about that process, but I thought that the HDR was more impressive here. And it's a noticeable upgrade over the Blu-ray, but not a massive leap. These next three are all, they all have decent Blu-rays. The 4Ks are definitely better, and the HDR helps. And of course, the Atmos track upgrade on all of them is a huge reason to upgrade to 4K. But this one was, it's faithful. It's not overly done on HDR. Thought the black levels were better here than on some of the ones shot on film, but it's not nearly as detailed, or as, especially the fine details, facial structures and things like that, as the previous three. So now we get Resident Evil Retribution, which again, this was shot for a 3D audience, 3D IMAX actually, but you don't get 3D here. But now the interesting difference with the digitally shot version of Afterlife is this was shot on something called HD cam, which was very early digital filmmaking technology. And Resident Evil Retribution was shot on a red code camera, and it was actually shot at 5K. So it has a much higher resolution source, although it was downsourced to 2K and then upscaled to 4K for this release. So that is probably confusing, but shot in 5K, they took the 5K image, turned it into a 2K image for theaters and for Blu-ray releases, and now with this, they've upscaled the 2K to the 4K. So this was one of my favorites from a visual standpoint, because that 5K source is really nice, but it's still not as good as coming from 35mm because it is an upscale. HDR on this was also very faithful to the source. That's one thing I want to commend Sony on throughout this series, is it's kind of a dark, dim, we're talking about a post-apocalyptic world, and there isn't a whole lot of, super bright colors throughout the movies. They have kind of this interesting color tone, but it's not overly bright and exciting to look at just from a color standpoint. And they didn't overdo it with the HDR to make it look like fake almost. So they did a good job here. Detail on this one is better than Afterlife, not as good as some of the 35mm transfers, but the Atmos track on these next two, this one and the newest one, the final chapter, are also standouts. The Atmos on these newer movies is incredible. So from an audio standpoint, you're getting a great release. And now the last one, Resident Evil, the final chapter. Interestingly enough, this was also shot at 5K, but it has a 4K digital intermediate. So this is the only true digital 4K title in the collection. And I really, really liked the detail on this one the most. I will say, as much as I love 35mm and the transfers that you can get on 4K, I'm still a sucker for a true 4K digital image, and just the sheer quality that you can get on disc with that. It just looks so smooth and so just on point and precise and detailed throughout. And that's what this one's all about. I did have some issues with the HDR. I didn't love the black levels. I thought those struggled a little bit, which I was surprised by, considering it's a true 4K title. I was hoping maybe the color grading would be a little bit better, but there was some crushed blacks and some scenes that were a little hard to make out, almost got a little too dark at points. Not that the HDR would have helped that so much, but maybe just balanced grays and blacks and dark colors a little bit better. But again, the Atmos track on this is an absolute standout, gives your system a workout, and it is the only true 4K digital of this. So you've got a few 4K transfers in those first couple movies. The rest of them are 2K upscales, and then this one, which is the 4K true digital 4K. So an interesting mix. They all look and feel very different over the years, but I do think Sony did a pretty good job with all of these. The Atmos tracks in particular are the big standout for me, as well as these first couple of movies, which I don't believe have any standalone 4K releases yet. Those are a big upgrade. This one getting a 4K is a nice upgrade. I actually think that only these most recent two have 4K, so 4 out of these 6 movies are brand new to 4K. So if you're a Resident Evil fan, you're getting a very nice set. I would have preferred some steelbooks or maybe a little bit more of a premium packaging feel, but your 4K discs are all, above average to very good at best, and your Atmos tracks are excellent. So I'd say overall, as long as you're a fan and you're willing to upgrade, this is worth a purchase. If you're not a fan and you're going in with a blind buy, I might hold off and see what the pricing on this does. You can probably snag it for a decent price in a little bit or wait for a sale on it. But if you're a fan, these are as good as they've ever looked. It's definitely as good as it's ever sounded. And it's a nice little collector's edition for your collection and for yourself. So that's it for this video. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of what you can expect. If you have already ordered this, it's going to be available, like I said, November 17th. If you haven't ordered it yet and you're interested, check the link down in the description. That's a great way to help support my channel. Just by buying through my links, that always helps support Films at Home and the entire channel. So I really appreciate that. Make sure you follow me on Instagram to stay up to date, and make sure you subscribe and have your notifications on as we make our push towards 100K subscribers, hopefully by the end of next year. That's the new goal, so help me get there. Let's do it. But otherwise, thank you for watching. Thank you to Sony for sending this early so we could get a quick review in for everybody before it releases, and you can get a good idea on what you're receiving. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys soon.